So there's a lot of this, information and technology that is becoming available to us every single day.
Right.
And what we were talking about a little bit earlier, yesterday actually, on our flight over, was a little bit about, do you think flying has become harder, or do you think the technology has made it easier? And with that, do you think that the leadership and decision-making process on the flight deck has changed, degraded, or gotten better? What are your thoughts?
I think over the last, say, 10, 15 years, with the introduction of the threat error management model, we've been able to identify, at least cockpit resource management problems a little bit better. So I think it's made us more professional in the sense that we know how to articulate and cope with problems or issues that come up. I think we've gotten smarter with the new technology. Also, we've also faced some contract issues, outside influences that affect our performance. So in my particular case, it's made me more aware of things that are going on outside and caused me to focus more in the cockpit. So I'd say overall, we're more professional. We're more aware of what's going on in the cockpit, a little bit more sensitive to our colleagues that we're flying with. And I think with the introduction we just talked about, the EFB, all these different things have made us more professional and better at our craft than we were, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what we were talking to about last night. I kind of feel the same way, that I can remember a time before smartphones, being based in Chicago in the wintertime. We have weather. We're going to a place that's snowing. We have 2 alternates. We have a takeoff alternate. Those are the days where you're really earning your keep.
Right.
And I used to sit there at the gate, and there used to be many monitors and computer systems at one gate, simply because they knew that the captain was going to have to print out a flight plan, which we don't really do anymore. Then the pilots would have access to a terminal to check weather prior to departure. And then, of course, the gate agents would have to have monitors for their duties and responsibilities. And I can remember one time, many years ago, I was looking at the NOAA site for weather and looking at what the snowstorm was doing and looking at our route and our estimated time of arrival and the TAF. And simply because I didn't just print the release and go.
Right.
My captain for that particular trip was already at the aircraft. He had set up what they called the nest. When you get into the cockpit for the first time, or the flight deck, you set up your nest.
Right.
You pull everything out that you're going to use. You put everything where you want it, your sticky notes, whatever you have. And no knee boards, ladies and gentlemen, no knee boards. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So
still in the military, they do.
And I've flown with captains that
Right.
still, especially helicopter pilot captains, that they still love that knee board, and it's very convenient.
Right.
But in the flight deck, we kind of just spread out normally and just put little pieces of paper at places, and so we have our little nest the way we like things. And that's what he was setting up. And when I went down there, I went, well, I got your release for you, Captain. I'll go do the walk around. I just checked the weather. The weather looks good. The snowstorm is going to stay south of our route. So the dispatcher did a good job by taking us a little bit north than what we normally would do. And he goes, you check the weather? Well, how did you do that? I'm like, on the NOAA app, up at the gate, on the computer. He goes, well, what the hell did you do that for? Now I'm going to be paranoid the whole flight. I don't ever check the weather. So what does it matter? They're going to make us go anyway.
Right.
It's like we have a choice. The captain doesn't have the authority to cancel a flight anyway.
Right.
Now I'm going to be worried about it. I say, well, I just told you not to worry.
Right.
Right. And he kind of said it in jest, but in those days,
right,
there was that aspect of not knowing.
Sure.
Because you get complacent. Complacency was a big word in training,
right,
current training as well.
Right.
And like you said, today with all the technology we have.
Yeah, I didn't really delve into it as much in my mind when we were talking about it last night, but you just brought up some very salient points with the introduction of, let's just say, on the Jeppesen app, when you have the approach plate up. I was, up until just maybe 2 trips ago, I was still reading the F4 messages, and I would scroll through the NOTAMs. I didn't realize one of my first officers 2 trips ago at Legacy told me, if you pull up the approach plate on Jeppesen and you hit the NOTAM, you'll actually get the NOTAMs for that approach.
Yeah.
Saves you so much time and effort. And then the same thing with WSI. If you get a new routing and you delete your flight number and you re-enter your flight number, you'll actually get the refiled routing when you enter the new flight number based on the input from the ATC.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even have to change the routing on the WSI. It's all automatic.
Real time.
And it's just amazing with the link with the weather, the overlay on your route with the weather. I mean, it just takes things that you took for granted back in the day. It puts it right there for you. It increases your situational awareness. And like I said, makes us better professionals, more skilled at our craft.
Yeah. And that information is absolutely crucial. Probably, some would argue 100% of the time. I think realistically, probably 60% of that time, you need to rely on that information quickly to make sound decisions.
Right.
We used to talk about, you mentioned the TEM and the CRM model. We used to mention the CRM model. It was a model that was developed, in the 90s, I think.
Probably.
To eliminate
late 90s. Right.
Yeah, the captain's always right. Every leg is the captain's leg. They'll allow you to touch the buttons, but only if you ask permission first. And the only 3 things the captain ever wants to hear from his FO is, "I'll take the chicken, clear on the right." And "How'd you get to be so smart, captain?" Right? So we had to get rid of that because through the NTSB accident investigations of the time, they found that there was a lot of this totalitarian rule in the cockpit.
Right.
And they developed CRM as a way to minimize those kind of incidences that could potentially create an accident or incident. And CRM was just shoveled down our throats in training every single time we were back in the schoolhouse. We have to be open. If one person is questioning something, we should all be questioning it. And the pleasure that comes from flying with you, and we mentioned this on the last podcast, is that you've always been very receptive to input, not just from your fellow pilot or your FO, but from your flight crew, your flight attendants. This time we flew together, I noticed that your pre-flight briefing to the cabin crew is consistent, it's professional, and you do it with a tone that's very welcoming. And that's unfortunately very rare.
Thank you. Yeah. And we talked about leadership characteristics, things that you learn from not just the good, but the bad captains and commanding officers in the military. And I always start my flights out with a crew brief with the cabin crew. And I got that format straight out of the FOM, and some of the messages that we get from the company, how to handle now that we have the issue with wearing of face masks, how to report that, how to coordinate if you have an issue, cabin items, potential weather, turbulence. You just go down the list, and it sets the tone you let them know that you have their back 100%. I have a little caricature that I share with them, 2 stick figures, and one guy's got the middle of the body. Basically, I got your back is what you're telling them. And they really appreciate it. And like you said, it's unfortunate, but they don't receive that much. And I like to do that. It sets a tone, even if you're only flying a leg with them. It just breaks the ice, lets them know that you're with them, and it makes it a safe environment to operate the aircraft.
Yeah. And if you're an aspiring pilot and you dream of one day commanding a ship and flying for a mainline carrier, remember that those crew briefings are essential. And don't forget to do it on the first leg, even if you're only doing one leg. Because I could tell you right now, a flight comes to mind that departed LaGuardia about a decade ago, first leg trip together. And that flight lasted less than a few minutes before it ended up in the Hudson.
Right.
That crew briefing before a flight, you might think, oh, no big deal. I'll catch them on the next one.
Right.
Or we're rushed and, the plane got in late and we just got here. I have to run my checklist and I don't have time for I'll get you on the next one. Or you only talk to the purser, which is what I see 90% of the time. You give a briefing to the purser and you're assuming the purser is now going to go and disseminate that briefing to the other 2, 3, or 4 flight attendants, or however many you may have on board your equipment. And then you find out later that it would have been nice to receive a briefing, Captain. And the captain says, well, I gave it to the purser.
Right.
So it's nice the way you do it. I really appreciate it.
And that, we talked about how sometimes outside influence can force crews to rush to comply. And so I make it a point. Obviously you have to be flexible, but I try to let the gate agents know that even though the plane just got there or they need to board the plane in 20 minutes, I need 5 minutes with my crew just to accomplish that, because I put that much priority on doing that. So when they want to send the passengers down, I tell them, no, we have to brief as a crew first, and then we can do the rest. And they appreciate that, because now if they're getting to the flight late, they're not rushing and putting their bags up and don't have time to check catering and do their pre-flight checks. So it takes a little bit of pressure on them. And then I usually tell the gate agent also, when the purser or the number 1 is ready, that's when we're ready to board. So
good.
Yeah. Try to be consistent with that as well.
Now, we've been talking about, the tools that we have at our disposal, the multitude of different apps that we can use to gather information on the flight deck, real time, most of the time, with our Wi-Fi connections that some of the carriers are now have on their entire fleet for the flight deck. Do you think there's some information overload with that?
Not that possibly. I try to be, just like my briefs, consistent with the information that I access so that I don't have that issue. I go straight to the tablet. I go to CCI to get all the flight information, crew information, flight plan, all that data. I check the weather. There's just a few items that I use consistently to make sure that I'm not overloaded with too much data. And that also has to do with prep, which I'll admit I don't always prepare enough. I had a trip to Mexico City a few weeks ago, and I was terrified because I had never been to Mexico City. I know there's a lot of terrain down there. I was fortunate enough to have to go to the schoolhouse for landings. And after we finished the maneuvers validation, basically is what it turned into be, I asked the check airman if he would take me down to Mexico City and we could run the approach.
Yeah.
So it ended up being a great tool because I got to see what I was, getting ready to fly. in a couple of weeks, and I had an uneventful flight into Mexico City. But I mean, I prepped. I did the sim ride, which not all of us have an opportunity to do that. But then I went back home and I studied all the company references to, fly that approach safely into Mexico City. And there's a lot of things, especially, well, in our industry, there are a lot of things that can really bite you. And if you don't take the time to prep and prepare.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of scratched the surface with this, but this is a wonderful way to segue into it. The new model, and we've talked about this before on the podcast as well, is what's called threat and error management. And I think it's like CRM 2.0. It is it's a Swiss cheese model, is what some people call it. So you have threats coming at you, no matter what you do, in every aspect of your life, not just for aviation.
Right.
You get in your car to drive down to the grocery store to pick up your groceries for the week. There are threats that are coming at you from all directions. And what the threat and error management model does is, in a simple term, it makes sure that in terms of being in the green, in the yellow, or in the red, that you can recognize when you're in the green. And you've got this, everything, all the ducks are aligned and everything. And when you start to get into the yellow, or feel behind, or feel something's not right, that you recognize it and you stop and you vocalize it, especially on a flight deck, that, hey, I'm in the yellow. And all right, well, let's slow it down and let's get you back in the green. And this threat and error management model, as you learn more about it, you learn about all the layers. There's the layers of the pilots in the flight deck, and there's the layer of, the station operation or the gate agents, and then the layer of the flight attendants and mechanics and SOC and MOC and ATC and all these organizations that when you're flying a flight, like, for example, what we're going to be doing here in a few hours from Orlando to Dallas, there are so many people and organizations involved in tracking, in catering, in maintaining your aircraft, and making sure that all the ducks are aligned in a row. And a threat and error management model, threats get through it. And if you're really having a bad day, a threat has gotten through at least 6-7 layers of safety. And it's a great model for the modern world in the way we're operating. Do you feel that the TEM model has made a huge difference between the way we used to say CRM was the key factor of keeping us safe?
Absolutely. I mean, just being able to use that term, I'm in the yellow, I'm in the red, I'm in the green. I remember when I first started as an FO on the Super 80 in Chicago, I'd be over there in my nest with my pen, paper, talking on the radio, trying to keep track of my finger, where we were on the Jeppesen chart. And the captain would look over me. He would say, wow, you got a lot going on over there, but now, and I was too busy trying to keep track of everything. That would have been a perfect opportunity if we had those colors to say, yeah, I'm in the yellow right now. I got my head down. I can't keep up with the ATC instructions to get to the runway. Can we just take a minute? But now, you have that ability to say, I'm in the yellow. Let's take it down. You have that tool to articulate where you are, how you feel, what's your situational awareness, how are you coping with the current situation in the cockpit. So I really love the threat error management tool. I think it's been a great tool to stay connected to your just by dividing pilot flying and pilot monitoring. We didn't have that before either. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if things start to really cloud up for me as a captain, it's almost better to have the first officer take the controls so I can take a step back, and now I have a better picture overall situational awareness of what's going on, and I can recage my gyro and get back in the game and get back in the green.
Yeah, nice. Absolutely.